So I want to start this video off with some things that I've been seeing and feeling over the last 2 months, mainly because, as some of you are seeing on Facebook, there's a lot of activity going on right now with earthquakes, with lightning, with weather. There's a lot of things going on, and not sure whether it has anything to do with what I've seen and experienced over the last 2 months, but I wanted to pass that on just in case anyone else has maybe observed some of those things or had that. What I've noticed over the last 2 months and what I've felt is that we've essentially had darkness up here where we live up in Washington. It's been dark and cloudy. It's been wet. Everything has been gray and indistinct. And in the beginning, I started getting the distinct feeling that we were passing through a veil or a void of some kind. That everything, like I said, everything appeared to be very indistinct. The colors, the forms, just the environment. Nothing seemed to be very, very clear as it had been before. One of the things too with water. Water is a cleansing agent. Water is the lifeblood of this planet, contrary to what people think when they talk about oil being the lifeblood. Oil is not, it's water. If you think back, everything on this planet has water in some degree in it. Water is memory, water is change, as the Japanese scientists showed. Water, the vibrations, the energies around water changes its structure, and that's, like I said, water is the basic content. And we've had rain up here for 2 months, which is more than they've had before in our area. And as I said, I've noticed that we've been passing through, and it just very much felt like a veil of some kind. And towards the end of this 2 month cycle, which ended a few days ago, I noticed that things were kind of even hard to explain, but things were kind of sticking. It was like we were coming through the final part of the veil or the void, whatever it was we were going through. And now it's starting to have a lot of occurrences on Earth, what they call natural things, with earthquakes, lightning, storms, cold, a lot of things that are happening now that some of them happen regularly, but there seems to be an increase now, whereas during that last couple of months, at least we didn't notice any of those kind of things up here. So I wanted to kind of pass it on. Maybe somebody else noticed or felt something like that, but to me, it indicates a change. We have moved through to be it another dimension or of some kind. I don't really know. At this point, I haven't been given any more information on it. It's just what I've noticed. So, and what I want to do also is touch up on the video I did before about realities. I want to answer a couple of questions that people have asked. Maybe others have had the same kind of a question, and it can help them out. The other thing I wanted to bring up is I'm making these videos not because I want you to think like me. I want you to think. I want you to look at things differently than maybe you're used to looking at them. I don't want you to accept what other people say, what you've read, what you see. I want you to question everything, because once you start accepting something as being what it is, you've limited your growth now. So don't accept what other people say, no matter how many books they have, no matter how many appearances they've made, interviews they've had, or how much they charge for their show to go to. Take what you hear them say, see what feels good to you. If anything does feel good, take it and see where it leads you on your journey. Don't try to follow their journey, because each of us has their own journey. The experiences and the things that they have are theirs, and how they interpret it, how they see it is from their point, and you need to do the same thing for yourself. So take what other people tell you. If it feels right to you, kind of go with it, and what it does is it'll actually lead you into other possibilities maybe that you hadn't considered before. So follow your own path, nothing else. Okay, realities. As I mentioned, the concept is that realities are not real. As I said before, realities are a picture, a picture in thought form, and that comes back to a little bit to definitions on how you describe the word real, how people define it. My definition of something being real is it would have to be eternal. Always have been and always will be. Because to me, once something is created, it has an ending. And anytime something is created, something has a beginning and an end. How can it be real if it's no longer here? And you can say, well, it was real. Well, what do you mean it was real? It's not real now because it's not here, so it's not real. In order to be real, something has to be eternal. And the realities that we are experiencing are not real. They are, I guess for lack of a better term, they're in your head as to what's happening. Essentially what it is an energetic vibrational waveform that has a program within the vibration. And through our ego mind and the brain that we have here, we interpret those vibrations in a certain way, which allows us to see the programs and see what's going on around us in the way that we interpret that vibration. Without, if we weren't interpreting it, it would simply be a vibration. So it's interpreted by us, translated into what we call a physical reality, a physical image, and a lot of that has to do with your beliefs in the default system. So I think what I'll do is I'll go into what the ego mind is, conscious, subconscious, and unconscious minds, and it's maybe a little different than what you've heard other people talk about when they describe those terms. And I'm going to describe this based on an experience I had, and the information that I got while I was on this experience was essentially out of my body. And I had the opportunity to go to what I would call nothing. And when I say the term nothing, it isn't nothing because even nothing is something. Even an empty board is an empty board. So the concept of nothing is the way it's described only because there is a sense of awareness, but there's no need to create, manifest, or be anything in order to understand that you are an awareness, that you are there. It's not a sense of individuality. That doesn't really exist. It's not a sense of feelings. There's nothing there in that respect. It's simply an awareness. And it's, like I said, it described it as nothing, but it's hard to describe until an individual is able to experience that point, that state of of awareness and being. And so that's kind of where all this starts from, is that what we'd call nothing essentially created source, is what we call source. Source was created as energy, vibration, and light in order to create what we call a physical universe. And that's where everything that we see, everything that was, is, and will be, was created instantly at the same time. It was essentially a thought to experience itself by nothing. And in order for it to manifest it into a form that could be experienced, it created what we call source. Source is light, energy, and vibration, as I said, and from that we have atoms and the vibrations and the things that we interpret as a physical reality. At the moment that at the moment that source was created, it also divided itself into what I call the unconscious mind. It was at that point that we gained a sense of individuality. Prior to that, at the point of nothingness, it was more of a oneness, but it was not a sense of anything beyond our own awareness. But yet there was more there. It was a point when source was created that this awareness separated into what I call the unconscious mind. Each of those unconscious minds became what we refer to as a universe. It essentially created a universe based upon the thought that nothing had to experience itself. At that moment, and at that moment as well, all of the roles that we would play throughout all of these different realities, dimensions, and universes were decided. It was all done at that time, that instant in time. So when I say that you are experiencing your reality, that is where it came from at that point in time. Each of those unconscious, we call unconscious minds, became a universe. And within those universes, it then created aspects of itself. And I call those aspects the subconscious. The subconscious is an aspect of us outside of what we decide to be as a what we call a physical realm. It's us within the still spirit form. I refer to it as a spirit guide, but it is us. It is not something that is outside of and separate from us. It is us. It's the us that is not within this physical reality experience and the experience that we are having here in what we refer to as human form. I don't want to call it angels. The main reason for that is, again, by definitions, angels, the common thought, are referred to as entities and beings that were created by God, again, created by God, for use by God. They are his slaves and his servants. So when you're talking to angels, when you're calling upon angels, you have to understand that they were not made for you. They are not loyal to you in the respect that their loyalty belongs to their creator. So just keep that in mind. Again, when you start looking at angels, you start looking at something that is outside of you, beyond you, different than you, and that's just not what it is. It's let's say the subconscious mind is what you could call your spirit guide. It's you. It's an aspect of you on the outside. It's what gives you the feelings inside when you're in contact, that allows you to have a synchronistic flow in your life. It allows you to be at the right place, do the right thing. That's what your subconscious is. It's essentially that part that knows everything. It knows all the roles you're going to have, it knows all the parts you're going to play and what's supposed to happen. And it's what you would call the director, but it's directing you to what has already happened and what you're supposed to be doing in that respect. The connection that we have to the subconscious is through what I call the conscious mind. The conscious mind is not an actual thing. It is simply a connection between the spirit world and what we call the physical world, or the ego mind. The ego mind is the default base loading program for this reality. It programs the brain, which then programs the body. The default programs in this world operate through the ego mind, which is based upon fear. And again, you know what the ego is, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about people who live within their ego, the sense of self, and so on. And that's where all of your that's how religions and all these other forms of worship come in, because the ego wants to live. It doesn't have a sense of being connected to the unconscious or subconscious self, so it wants to seek a way in order to continue its existence beyond this life here, what we call death. Unfortunately, the ego isn't going to exist beyond that, because it's needed while you're in physical form, but it's not necessarily needed outside of the physical form. And again, I call that the ego mind, the programming mind. Now, what you can do when you start to become more aware, when you start to, I guess we could say, awaken yourself to aspects beyond your physical reality, aspects beyond your ego mind, you open up that connection, the conscious connection to your subconscious self. Now, that connection is always there. It's simply we have a tendency to turn it off, because the ego mind doesn't like to think outside of itself. It focuses on it, not on anything outside of it. The connection, the conscious connection to the subconscious mind, is activated when you start realizing there's more beyond the ego mind. You start questioning, you start moving forward and looking at things from a different view, and stop accepting everything that you're being told as being true. And that helps to establish and open up that connection a little bit better. That's where your intuition comes from, the feelings that you have of doing things, when to go, what to do, living in the flow, being more relaxed. You can also reprogram the ego mind, the brain, through the ego mind, using the subconscious conscious connection. And when you do that, you're changing your beliefs beyond the default programming. And when you start changing those beliefs, it helps to focus you into those different realities, because now you've accepted other possibilities. So essentially, you have the ego mind, which is the base default loading program for the brain in this world. It lives in a world of fear, which is what the media, religions, governments, you name it, everything targets. Advertising, everything targets the ego mind on this reality. And as long as you are living and programmed through that ego mind, you accept everything. That's why we get sick. That's why we get hurt. It's because we accept the programming that those things are real, when in actuality they're not. because remember, you're energy. Remember what atoms are. Remember this, they're 99.9% space. They're not actually solidity. The illusion of solid is exactly that, an illusion. The one thing to look at when you look at that is that atoms, what's the difference between the atoms in a piece of wood, the atoms in a car, the atoms in a house, the atoms in a body, the atoms in an animal, the atoms in a tree or a cloud? Atoms are atoms. Now they say that there's different amount of electrons and things floating around them, but the fact is atoms are atoms. They're no different in appearance than any other atom. So why do things look different on this reality? Well, they look different because of that vibration, the vibration and the frequency of what that they're operating at, and how we translate that program through the ego mind into the brain. And when you open up that conscious connection to the subconscious mind, you can do that reprogramming through the ego mind into the brain. You don't want to get rid of the ego mind because it is necessary. And it's how you program the brain when you are inside a physical reality. So it's there, it's a necessary part, but you don't want it to do the one, you don't want it to be the one that's doing the programming on its own. You want to have the programming come from the subconscious mind through the conscious mind, through the ego mind into the brain, which then will affect the body and everything else around you. One of the other questions had to do with the idea of, is there anything that we have to do in order to move timelines? And no, you don't. You don't have to do anything. It's going to happen. It's part of the program, because remember, I believe we're already experiencing the choices we made. We are not making the choices. We are not creating. We're not manifesting. We're doing what we are supposed to do. We're filling a role that was created at that moment of everything at the same time. And one of the other things I wanted to bring up about that, when I was talking about the ego mind, the consciousness, subconscious, and unconscious minds as being the only levels there are, one of the reasons why they like to tell you that there are just huge amounts of auras and conscious levels and all kinds of different levels and fields that you have to work your way through is because if they can get you believing and accepting those concepts, one, they make a lot of money off you because you're going to go through their programs in order to clear these fields, in order to open this up and close that and do all those different things that aren't necessary. It also keeps your mind focused within the reality that you are in, because you are never going to get through all those programs. And so in your brain, in your mind, you are still thinking that you're going to have to come back, because no matter how many of those levels you clear, no matter how many of those programs you go through, you're going to have to come back again. It's just, that's because you still believe that. You know that in your mind you haven't gotten through it. So when you throw out all those different levels and layers and understand that the only ones that exist are the ones, essentially the ones that I just told you about, and that is the ego mind, which is here on this world, the consciousness, but is a connection, and the subconscious and unconscious, then that's it. There is nothing else, and you are connected and a part of all that at the same time. Now, these other programs that they teach about, some of the programs, things like healing modalities and other aspects, psychics, and all the different programs that are out there, they're important and they have a role because they are steps. A lot of people who grow up in this reality grow up being brainwashed with science. They grew up through school. They grew up being taught by their parents and everyone else all their limitations. And when you start opening yourself up to possibilities beyond what you have been told and taught by the system through the ego mind, you can start moving forward. And that's what these other things like healing modalities and opening yourself to the idea that maybe there's energy fields and other layers and systems. By opening yourself up to that, you open yourself up to more possibilities. And the more possibilities you open yourself up to, the greater expanses you're going to have of your awareness, the stronger the connection you're going to have to your unconscious self through your conscious mind. So they are important. It's like going up a staircase. You don't go from the bottom to the top in one jump. You take it a step at a time. And so they're important for that. One thing to remember is that none of those things are the end. None of those are the end all. None of them will get you to where you want to be. They are simply steps. And remember that. If you want to play with them and practice with them, that's fine in the beginning. But at some point, you really need to move on past those if you really want to continue your growth. That's enough for now. It takes about 2 hours for me to upload just this much video, so I'm going to go ahead and stop now. If you have any questions about anything else, feel free to message me on Facebook, and I will see if it's something that I have an answer to. In the meantime, may your day be as you choose it to be.